Finishers are an integral part of pro wrestling. In my mind, they are as much a part of wrestling as the wrestlers or the ring. Sometimes wrestling can occur without them, but it tends to be much better when they are included. In trying to select what the greatest finisher in pro wrestling history is, there's an almost infinite field of criteria that you could use when trying to make your decision, and over the course of this series I'll likely use lots of different methods. But do keep in mind, this is purely subjective, and of course there can never be a single greatest finisher in pro wrestling history. Anyway, enough of my blabbering, time for the first candidate, the RKO. The RKO can best be described in wrestling terminology as a jumping 3/4 facelock front face bulldog. What a mouthful. In essence, under normal circumstances, Randy Orton, with his back to his opponent, will jump in the air and grab the back of his opponent's head with his hand and with his bicep pressed against their jaw or throat, pull the opponent to the floor, causing them to land on their face. The RKO is always the move that I first bring up in discussions with friends about the best finisher, and so it's only fitting that it's the first in this series. And when I say the RKO is the best finisher, yes, I mean that it is better than both the similar moves of the Ace Crusher and the Diamond Cutter. Fight me. Although Executive Vice President of Talent Relations, John Laurinaitis, invented the move as Johnny Ace back in 1988, I believe that it is Randy Orton who has realised the full potential of the move and brought it into greater prominence. One of the main arguments that I make about the RKO being the best finisher is that it can be used in a massive variety of situations. And although it has been somewhat of a meme, one of the strengths of the RKO is that it can truly be hit out of nowhere. This ability to hit it out of nowhere in surprise situations has led to some of the most iconic moments in WWE history. Who can forget the amazing RKO counter to the shooting star press that Orton hit on Evan Bourne on Raw? I don't think there are any other finishers that would have allowed for this moment to have happened. Of course, part of the ability for this move to have been hit in such spectacular fashion has to go down to the athleticism of both Bourne and Orton themselves. But a big part of the ability for the moment to happen at all is down to the design and execution of the move itself. No other move would have been possible from this position. Orton doesn't even make it fully to his feet. It looks like he's doing the limbo when he catches Bourne. The limited contact points between the two wrestlers during the RKO are what allows this sort of impressive move to be performed. We saw a similarly impressive use of the RKO in countering a move when Randy Orton reversed Seth Rollins' curb stomp at WrestleMania 31. Again, part of the praise has to go to the athleticism of the two wrestlers, but again this spot would not have been possible with any other finishing move. This move wouldn't have worked with something like the attitude adjustment, for instance, because this would involve catching the opponent first, which increases the possibility that the move could go wrong, with either the opponent landing incorrectly and hurting themselves, or the falling mass being too much for the catcher to hold and dropping them, meaning the moment will be lost. Not to mention that allowing gravity to take its course makes it look much smoother as well as impactful. And for those that are saying that any strike finishers could have been used in this situation, a la Shawn Michaels and Shelton Benjamin, to this I would say that these strike finishers might be too dangerous to perform in the two situations described, or they might not look as good as the RKO anyway. Can you imagine if instead of a shooting star press into the RKO, we instead got it into a bullhammer elbow? While we might also have looked back at this fondly, 1, it would have been harder to have been pulled off, needing the bullhammerer to be fully on their feet and with enough wind up to hit it. And 2, if it was able to be pulled off without a botch ruining it, it would have looked less impactful and less impressive than the RKO. The RKO goes with the gravity rather than trying to fight it, which makes it easier to sell the devastation. With a strike move, the direction of travel should change if the opponent was actually hit, but you can't really do that if you're keeping your opponent safe. Another component to the RKO being a candidate for greatest finisher in pro wrestling history is that it can be used to put opponents through tables and other objects. It can be used off ladders, off turnbuckles, off aprons, onto aprons, out of other people's finishers and other situations. This wide variety of situations is all down to the simplicity of the move. Of course, there are numerous points of criteria that you could use in order to decide what makes a great finisher, and one of these points is believability. One could argue that the RKO lacks believability in several ways. First off, the user of the finisher ends up falling and landing on their back from the same height as the receiver of the move will. Indeed, the height that Randy normally falls from is probably higher than several other finishing moves, such as the rock bottom for instance. That's supposed to be match-ending, devastating moves. And yet, when Orton performs the RKO, unless he's very incapacitated and tired from a long match, he will normally pop straight back up after hitting the move. This not only delegitimises his own move, If he can pop back up after falling from that height, then surely his opponent is also able to do this, and yet they never do. But it also delegitimises moves of fellow wrestlers. If Orton falls further and harder hitting his move than you do hitting yours on him, how can yours be powerful? This in turn makes us question the resiliency of the other wrestlers that get put away with these now apparently inferior moves, and in essence undermines wrestling as a whole. Maybe that was a step too far, but the believability of the RKO is also undermined by its visual and physical distance from real life. For example, it's difficult for the audience to believe that the RKO could be an effective move in a street fight or in the UFC. And while I realise that if wrestling was just like real life, then it would just be a worse version of the UFC. Part of the reason, if not the main reason, why we watch wrestling is a suspension of disbelief and the moves and situations that the suspension allow to occur. But to some, if it can't work in a real fight, then it's just not credible. Furthermore, it could be argued that the RKO does not look devastating enough. While it looks flashy and smooth and cool when Orton performs it, it doesn't look like it hurts a great amount. It may also be unclear to viewers what the intent of the RKO is. Should the opponent's face hit the mat, or Randy's shoulder? If it hits his shoulder, how can the move cause any real significant damage? But despite all of these negative factors, I still believe that the RKO is one of the best wrestling finishers ever created. It suits the character of Orton very well, can be used in possibly the widest variety of situations of any wrestling move, and has been used to win Orton several titles and big matches. It's one of my favourite wrestling moves, even if I might not necessarily be the world's biggest Randy Orton fan, and will certainly go down as one of the most iconic moves in wrestling history. But what do you think? What to you is the greatest finisher in pro wrestling history? Let me know in the comments below. This episode was written and produced by me, Stephen Lemontree. Our outro music is Simplicity by Macroform Music. If you ever want to contact us, you can do so on Instagram and Twitter at nevetslt or email nevetslt@gmail.com. That's NEVETSLT. Life is hearing a baby screaming and wishing it was socially acceptable to do the same. We'll see you next week.